What do you want to be when you grow up? A movie star? A doctor? A baseball player? Maybe an astronaut? Surely we all received this question dozens of times between the ages of 4 and 18, and our answers likely varied with time and the current fad. And though we have also likely asked the question a dozen times without giving it much thought, it could actually be one of the most tragic questions in the modern world. When you grow up. It's a vague statement that puts little pressure on these children, and the answers can be quite sweet or hilarious. But what does it actually mean? When do we grow up? Is it at 18, when we can smoke and vote and be drafted into the military? Or maybe at 21, when for some countries we can finally drink alcohol? Or perhaps it's even after we have spent our years at college and have finally taken our place in the world as an educated benefit to society. Who knows? Who cares, right? Wrong. The entire premise speaks to the idea that our real lives are starting in the near or distant future. At 10 years old, we can just glide peacefully along with no need for responsibility nor care in the world, since, after all, we aren't grown up. If we are bad kids or irresponsible young adults, it's forgiven, since we have years to go before we are actually going to be held to account. Right? Wrong. The Church generally teaches that we reach the age of reason at 7 years old. This means that we are fully capable of making decisions and understand the true difference between right and wrong. Thus, if we commit a mortal sin, we, even as a young child, are in that moment doomed to hell, just as much as someone who is 27 or 77 or 107. Sounds harsh, but it is the unquestionable teaching of the Church. These young children are treated by the world as mere babies who in time will be given their chance to matter or have real responsibilities. But the weight of sin can just as well hang on their souls as it does on ours. They are perfectly equal in their duty to God and themselves of staying in the state of grace, as is the Pope himself, when we are blessed to have a true one, of course. So, as we must shelter our children and protect their innocence at all costs, we should remember that they are not just along for the ride until some certain point as prescribed by the world. A world that desperately wants us and our children in hell. Most of us, shortly after reaching the age of reason, have also received the sacrament of confirmation. We are smacked lightly on the cheek, and as stated in my Catholic faith, we became soldiers of Christ, for it strengthens us in our profession of faith. The words soldiers of Christ is not an exaggeration. These supposed young children are soldiers of Christ. They are not named babies of Christ. They're not pages or wards or servants. They are not awaiting a further step or 10 more years to reach a point when they are finally granted their knighthood and named as soldier. No, they received it then at the very moment of confirmation. Christ and the Church allow this at such a young age because from the moment of reason we all are in a battle to the death. And since each day could lead to our earthly demise, it can also lead to our eternal one. This is why we are granted the grace of confirmation at such a young age. We are granted the grace of receiving the Holy Eucharist and the salvific grace of confession in order to help us win our fight and serve God to the best of our abilities. Now, does this mean that children should wear sackcloth and ashes and stop having fun? Of course not. As St. John Bosco said, enjoy yourself, but do not sin. Each child who has received these sacraments, or will receive them, has surely been made aware of the direness of the situation, of the fact that in the eyes of God and of sin they will be judged, as we all are judged, mercifully but justly. It is good for a reminder to view them, or for them to view themselves, for the youth listening, not as the world sees them, but as God sees them. As for the first part of the original question, what do we want to be when we grow up? There is no harm in a child dreaming of being an astronaut or a doctor or a baseball player, but it's not the answer that we should wish for, and it's not the one that we should teach them to give. After all, there should only be one goal for all of us, one daydream that we each have, and one answer to the question of what do we want? I want to go to heaven. And as soldiers of Christ, we will have to fight every second of every day to be victorious, until, with God's help, we will one day hear the sweetest words of all eternity. Come you, blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world.